Hey everybody, Sebastian back, and today we're here with Lost Hombres, and I believe we're at episode 40. So we've made it to 40, and so it's been a pleasure being with everybody and teaching you guys what's going on. And so I'm excited to continue this journey, and it's kind of wild watching my life transform little by little and just seeing the things that have come to me and just being able to be here and to teach everybody like a different way of looking at life and yeah, just what's been really nice is the further I get into my journey of spirituality and the more I understand how this realm works, the more interesting and more fascinating and the more I want to dive into it. And I've just been really allowing myself to be open to the idea of a world that I didn't understand because I wasn't provided the tools and insights to understand. And it's beautiful and it's fascinating to really watch things play out and to become part of something bigger than myself has really gave my life purpose and really allowed me to hone in a certain direction that I want to take myself. So I'm just excited to continue sharing this journey and welcome guys to Los Hombres. So today we'll talk about where I've just kind of been at with my knowledge and my journey of learning and kind of what I've taken away from my recent experiences. And what I can really break it down is that the more that I understand the spiritual realm, the more it starts to make sense how humanity operates, right? And how some of these metaphorical or these symbols, these stories, these concepts, when you look at them in a different lens, how they are so clear and consistently present that it kind of makes you go, wow, like maybe this has actually always been here and I just didn't know what I was looking at. So it's like reading, not knowing what a word means and seeing it everywhere, and it doesn't mean nothing to you then, right? And once you know what that word means, it changes the entire concept. So, kind of a way to think about it is think of how the word pizza, right, for many years didn't really mean much other than just pizza, right? But because of the Epstein files and everything happening for that stuff, well, now that word has a different connotation. So when you look back at history and you're seeing these people talk about pizza and pizza and pizza, and they always keep bringing it up, you start to go, oh, that is not what they were talking about. This is actually what they were talking about. So that's what gives you context, right? So you see things that are being provided you in one context, maybe like a delusion, you could say, right? And then as you continue working through it, you're like, wait, you guys have been doing this to me for a long time, haven't you? And now the veil starts to unravel itself. You start seeing the gravity of like what really is going on here. And you're like, wow, it is not looking so hot right now. So essentially, what we're dealing with is there has been a lot of, I would say, duality within our world, where there's the truth you're being shown, and then there's the truth that you're not being shown. And this happens in conversations. You could be saying one thing in, outside of you in the conversation, but there's a whole other conversation happening inside of you, right? And the world is working very similar to this way. So what's going on is if you look at the way our society is built, it's really built on giving other people trust of your own life and then hoping that they're going to do the best with that. But then in the end, they take advantage because you gave them the energy to take advantage of. And that is what's happening these days is there's one side that's being fed one information and then what's really happening. And now, as a spiritually open person, you start seeing reality for what it is, the truth and the gravity of things. And then you're like, wow, no, this is definitely not what I was taught to believe. This is definitely not where I see myself as wanting to continue to live like. Some of the stuff that's come up recently for me is I've been praying more actively, like outside of my body. So it's been interesting. I had an example where like a week and a half ago, or no, it was actually just a week ago. I was at this beach event with my kids, and we had been driving around probably like 40 minutes looking for a parking spot, and we kept going and going and nothing. Right, and I didn't want to get angry. I don't want to get upset. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna park right here. I parked in one of the like middle of the parking lot places. I grabbed my rosary and I just started to pray, and I just asked God to, like, if you could help me out, give me a good parking spot. Not even 10 seconds later, a truck in front of me just pulls out and leaves. And my kids were like, "What the heck, Dad? That was crazy." And my son even said he was praying with me, right, in his mind. And they were very impressed that this event took place and they witnessed this event happen. And I told them this is the power of what reality can do for you when you really know how to wield it and work with it. So those have been really pleasant moments in helping me continue my connection with the spiritual divine system, the monad, Christ, or whatever you want to call the being above. And it's just been nice to be able to connect with others and really like be there with my kids and teach them these things and live these beautiful moments that present themselves, opportunities for me to show grace, for me to ask for service and help. And one thing I find, the more that I work on myself, the more present I am with what I want from life, the easier it is to align myself with the energies of the universe to help me get those things that I want, right? So it's something that I've really been aligned with is whenever you get prompted by your mind or something in the world is trying to push you in a direction, well, then you take that opportunity and you follow through with the direction. You follow through with, living your purpose and living your life and allowing yourself to take opportunities that maybe in the past you may have avoided or you may have been afraid of. So learning about pushing through these struggles and really like getting into the meat and bones of like who I am, it's been really nice. So that's where I've been at lately, is really like taking the time to get to know myself on a spiritual level, and reinvent myself as the person that I truly am and truly meant to be, and learn something new about myself that I never gave myself the opportunity to learn about, right? How I can express myself and what my divinity looks like and what my purpose here on earth is from the great creator and also one thing I've like for example, like there's just certain things that kind of come natural. Like I was doing this prayer with this thing, and it just kind of like it feels normal to kind of do the little like thing where they hit yourself. It's kind of wild how like when you're doing it, it just kind of works this way. So there's certain things that I find so easy to apply. Like it just naturally just says, well, that makes sense. And so you just start doing certain things that you feel like you already knew how to do, right? It kind of goes back into, if you think the Assassin's Creed series, how your DNA like stores memories from past, people in your life. And so it's interesting to think like when we talk about past lives, is it possible that we are talking about past lives from our own families, right? Our own generational histories. And so it's interesting how sometimes that can happen, like where you have like these affinities for things. And then you ask yourself, was this something that one of my ancestors had an affinity for? Because obviously you've had a plethora of ancestors, right? You've had a lot going on. So it wouldn't be a surprise, right, that you have some sort of something in there that you can pull from and utilize. So yeah, that's what's been going on lately. I've been trying to get into exorcisms, and that seems like a fun place to go for me. And I want to learn more about that world, and that's where I've been kind of putting my mind towards. So we'll see kind of where that journey plays out. And so today I wanna talk to you guys again about a book that I've shown in the past, and I want to kind of get into it again. And this is the Book of Wisdom, good book for understanding how reality works and giving you an opportunity to kind of like break things down a little more, right? So if we look at the Book of Wisdom, I want to take you to a certain spot, and we're gonna work from that angle. Okay, so here is a depiction of the mind and how it is split up into three, and how you have the reptile, the mammal, and the higher brain. And this whole process explains a lot of what's happening on a metaphysical level in your mind and body. And I will break this down for us so that by the end of this, you have a whole new concept of how your mind and body work as one and what we're really looking at here and how to apply this information on a bigger scale, right? Okay, so let's talk about the brainstem. The brainstem is what we call the reptilian brain. So the reptilian brain is the fight or flight brain, and the fight or flight brain cares just about survival, the now, like let's get through this, right? So when you're going through hell, you're gonna get into fight or flight. Gotta live. I gotta breathe. I gotta go. So the reptile brain is all about the material world. It's all about the lower world. It's all about matter and presence. So lizards are, again, more towards the side of body, right? So then we have the mammal brain. And that's the one where you socialize. That's the one where you start to conversate with people. You can have prides. Like, think about like lions and stuff and gorillas. So they all kind of hang out together. You can also think of whales, dogs. They all have like groups. And animals that are mammals also show emotions. That's why a mama bear, it would be sad if her baby bear died. She would be mourning her and would be licking it and trying to care for it, even though it's passed away, right? So those mammals can have those feelings. They can come up for them, right? And then we also have our higher brain, where we can say that this is our prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain. And so this is where you would get like intuition or communication or wisdom. And so in order to learn and understand how the brain operates, well, we're going to have to give it an opportunity to, explore these different parts and then see how we can break them down to our own benefit, right? And really learn what each one of these parts needs for survival and what we can do to help improve those outcomes, right? And so, okay, so now we understand lower brain, reptile, fight or flight, mammal is the heart, and then higher brain is the human conscious. So reptiles, more likely to, sacrifice their young for their own good. Mammals are the kind of animal that will sacrifice themselves for their baby. They're the mama bear that jumps out there and tries to fight someone who's trying to interfere with her life, and that's that heart, right? Mammals care. They have emotions, and if you've ever had a dog or a cat, you will feel their energy because they're unique. They have that soul, what we talk about, right? The unconditional love. And so mammals will look for family. They will look for connection. They do want to live together, right? So that is important for the mammal brain. And then the higher conscious, right? So the way we work that one out is we have communication. And communication is important because when we are trying to find a common ground or we're trying to figure something out, it's important that we can both speak the same language so that we know what's going on. And so that's why when you're with somebody and you're trying to figure something out, you're going to give things names, right? So you'll be like, oh, that's a dog, that's a cat. And so you name all these things so that we can start building intuition. I like to tell people if I had a toaster, or if I thought of a toaster and I brought up the word toaster 300 years ago, they're not going to know what I'm talking about because they don't have context to understand what toaster is, So they're not going to be able to communicate well because they don't have the same language as I do. So there's going to be some barriers in there for what I can do to improve, right? And so we want to make sure that we go from the bottom of our body all the way up to the mind. And the only way to really do that is you have to regulate how you are managing these 3 layers of existence, right? Now let's go back to the high brain real quick because I forgot to mention 2 other parts. So you have the communication, then you have insight, and then you have wisdom, right? So first I have to communicate what's going on. And once we have a official language, it makes it easier to connect. And once we have that, then we can start building intuition. And we can be like, that doesn't make sense, or that doesn't make sense. And we can actually start making changes in how we are viewed and how people give us, credit for what we do because we're much more in tune with what's going on, right? So when we look at, again, the wisdom, you get all the way to the top, and that's where wisdom lies. So it's mind over matter. All right. So we can see here that there are these different brains, and they each have a different part of the prefrontal cortex, but they each affect us in a different way, and they're all necessary, right? So if we go up, all right. So lower self, material, sex, food, and power. Now, this concept of sex, food, and power, this sex, food, and power is really based off like the 80s and like how people back then were like all about money, like the economy, like, you know, being in stock market or whatever. And so those individuals stayed on the lower level. Okay. Now, why does the lower level matter? Well, the lower level you say is material world, right? So material world, another word for that is called capital. When you have capital as the primary source of, you know, people's lives, well, you start to lose their humanity. And the reason that is because if you look at the chart here, it goes from power to love, right? And how many times do you hear people, and even this is culture and society, that a guy will sleep with you, feed you, and he might even give you some of his money, but he's not available emotionally. Like he's not going to be able to give you that love. And when we don't receive that love, it's very, very hard to express ourselves. It's very hard to gain wisdom. It's very hard to gain intuition, because you are putting this negative like connotation into your life by staying in the lower field, right? Another way to think about it, and I like to say this, I like to say your bottom hole is for the material world. Your middle hole is for earth, right? Being able to work with your heart. And then being in your mind is the higher self, right? So like we have these three different selves that are existing within us. So when you want to like change how you operate, right? One of the things that we have to think about is how much is sex, food, and power really controlling your life? And so again, I got the guy that, you know, looking for love in all the wrong places. Well, this is an example how in order to find love within yourself, you actually have to let go of the power of food and sex, right? You have to let go of these lower frequency energies. Then let me talk about why that is, especially with, you know, everything. When you're talking about energy, right? When you're talking about like the lower energies and stuff, it's because the lower energies are the densest of the matter, right? An example, if you're going to eat food, you're going to eat material, right? And this process will weigh you down, right? So it weighs you down, right? Sex can make you weigh you down too, right? Eating food, and then power, right? It can also, when you have too much pressure on you, you don't feel like what? Getting up, right? You don't feel like working on yourself. So that's what we're dealing with these days, is how do I get from the bottom half of me to the top half, right? And most of my problems, again, love, right? Getting to that point, right? People don't know how to get into a position where they can, you know, be in love with themselves and grow with their expression, intuition, and wisdom, right? A lot of our folks these days, especially in America, are stuck in the lower half. Again, because we live in a capitalist society. They don't teach things like spirituality. They don't teach things like that. They rarely cover mental health. You know, they get away with covering mental health. I guess, and I like, for example, like my kids, one of the schools they were at, they actually were having issues with that too. And so, you know, we get into these different places where we want to like expand ourselves and we want to be more of who we are, but we have to consider like, where am I at in today? You know, is my bases clear? Is my lower half like doing fine? You know, am I doing good here and I can focus more on my upper half? Or what's going on in the lower half that's keeping me there and I can't seem to get out? And so it just kind of affects my ability to regulate and resonate. And again, we want to make sure that we are like both living in a healthier mindset, but also like learning how to continue to grow, right? So let's break down how there's three holes, and each one of those holes is going to impact the way you process food, right? So this hole, the bottom one, is the most dense hole. And so you're going to end up like weighing down, you're going to feel tired, you're going to feel empty, right? Because it's weighing you down. So this hole actually leads to that process of weighing down. And the next one you'd say is your nose, right? So if you look at your nose and you start breathing, it brings you to your lungs, right? So it naturally will pull to your lungs, and that helps you relax. It helps you be more present, right? So, we want to make sure that we are allowing ourselves that space to process things and sit with ourselves. So we want to make sure that we take care of our lower half, right? So that we can eventually get to the higher self. Now, how do we get to higher self, right? This might be a question people are going to come with. So let me help you understand. The bottom half is, again, your lizard brain. And if we look at the lizard brain, we're going to see some, interesting things. Again, the way they react to certain situations. And well, when you're dealing with these energies and you're dealing with lizard brain, where, again, it turns people off from being able to have intuition, being able to express themselves. And because they struggle with expressing themselves and being honest, they're going to more likely find unhealthy relationships, and they're going to, deny themselves the quality of love that they deserve. And so you see some challenges that come up, especially, like, I like to tell people to, there's this thing about the belly of the beast. And so it's kind of funny because if we think about, like, our belly, right, it's actually similar to what a beast would be, in the sense that it growls at you when it's hungry. Okay, it can also be hangry, so that's another thing that's interesting, right? And these things are, again, based on the bottom half of you, the physical, right? Now, it gets really interesting when we start talking about the physical world and how metaphysical, and I'm going to explain some things to you. So here on this chart, we see a couple things. This color spectrum on the right side, this has to do with the human energies that we all operate under. We call them chakras. And what essentially is happening is, on the bottom, you have what's called the root chakra. So that's the bottom half, right? That's where the beginning starts. And then you go up, and then it's like, this is for emotions or feelings. And then, like, the next one, actually, no, for like feelings, like for food, really. And then you have willpower. Okay, that's the next one. Then you have heart. Then you have communication. You have wisdom, and you have insight. And so, in order to climb up this ladder, you actually have to take care of the lower half. Like, you have to take care of this part of you that maybe people often avoid. And you have to deal with the internal system. Now, what's interesting, the reason it looks like a lake of fire and all that, is because if you look at your stomach actually is a pit of fire within it, and nothing's supposed to come out of it. That's why when you feed the lower hole, you're actually feeding yourself with sustenance, but that sustenance is going to make you tired and, pass out. So sustenance, even though the body needs it, it will wear it out, right? Now the soul, right? How do we feed that? Well, we feed it through great experiences. We feed it through loving each other. We feed it through enjoying each other's company and being around each other. And so there's a part of us that wants to socialize. This is why snakes are different from mammals. Again, they will sacrifice themselves for us. And that's true love. That's unconditional love. That's something that we can appreciate, when we see that. And then the next question is going to be, what is the higher brain going to be like? Like, what's going on up there, right? So the way I kind of see the higher brain is, it's kind of like the archangel stepping on Lucifer's neck. And it's the conscious brain. It's the intuitive brain. And so as we conquer the lower half with our archangel, essentially, then we dominate our nature. Or actually, I should say our animal instinct, right? So our animal instinct is being affected when our heart is open, right? We're able to connect with people, socialize, love everybody. And so there's a lot of positive outcomes from being able to, be in your heart. And then, again, the heavenly realm. Oh, another thing is, if you look at the color spectrum, it's very interesting here too. So you see red, right? You see, and that's related to like lava. You like orangey, and then yellow, where it's mixed thing of sand. And then green is the earth, right? So it's right in the middle, okay? And then you have the blue, light blue, dark blue, and purple, right? And so each one of these, again, is like showing you the rainbow, but also like what part it stands. Like the top part, the purple, goes with the heaven head, right? The green part goes with earth, and that red part goes with hell. So it's like the lava orange, right? It makes sense, right? So the stomach is the first pit. This is where we consume things. This is why we are considered sinners, because we have to consume. We don't have a choice. Like, if you don't eat food, eventually you're just gonna pass out. Like, you need to be eating something. But that's another thing. Like, what is the appropriate amount of time before you will pass out? What's the appropriate way to handle things, right? So, we want to also be incorporating into our health, like how can I make sure that I'm making sure I'm sticking to my things that I need, but I'm also, allowing myself for flexibility to keep growing and learning from, right? And so, okay, now we're talking about the bottom half, or hell, right? Now, if you think of your beast, your stomach, it's in the belly, and now you're gonna go see this experience and feel that energy in there. And once you understand that the belly of the beast is just a metaphor for a four-headed like dragon that can see in all cardinal directions, and so you start seeing imagery of like what these things are. So it starts giving you context of what kind of things you can do to improve whatever situation that you're going through, right? So there are tools and ways that we can help. And then as far as like the earth and the heart, right? So that's connected to your nose. So when you're breathing, you're actually bringing in air, so that's appropriate, right? And it's helping you ground yourself, because the one from below is for food. It's going to keep you low energy. And the one from the mid is the present. It's going to bring you into balance. So again, these things are helpful in understanding like what's going on internally and how can I best be of service, right? And then I have no idea. What's what kind of challenges we're gonna face until we get there, right? So sometimes we gotta like communicate. We gotta be able to have intuition, and we have to be able to get there. And that can be a challenge for people, because until we start communicating, until we start taking chances, it's gonna be really hard to change, right? And that's why loving yourself is a core component of change, because it's hard to know what's going to happen when you get older, right? So we want to make sure we have the capability of flexing as we need to. And let's talk about the higher brain for a moment, and let's appreciate kind of where it feeds it. So I like to say that these holes, right, your eyes, are the hole that your eyes like to feed. And in this case, we're going to say knowledge, right? So if you are studying knowledge, it actually feeds you in a way, right? Because some people say, I'm hungry for what? Knowledge. And I'll sit there all day reading a book that I'm really interested in, even though I haven't eaten all day. And so I'll make up an excuse for not eating. I'll make up a reason for not doing something, right? It's like, if I'm going to be able to read. Now here's where it gets really interesting. So on your body, right, memory is going to last a lot different in your heart and in your mind, right? So when we're feeding the body and it's feeding really dense, material food, right? It weighs it down, and it gets tired, right? It's like not functioning well. The person's overwhelmed. So when we feed our body too much, it actually takes away our energy. When we feed our heart, it opens us up, so we get to have good, common conversations. We get to feel good about people, so there's like a goodness in being able to be like, emotional and connected, and so yeah, it's definitely better to, like, as we go up, right, to understand that, hey, this is me climbing up the ladder of self, right? And then when we get to the mind, it's again like understanding that mind over matter. One of the things I'll even say is this: if we look at the belly of the beast as the serpent, and well, what does that mean? Well, when you don't discipline somebody, you don't discipline an animal or anything, they become unruly, right? They're just, nature at its highest form, you could say, right? They're just kind of existing and it's kind of, doing what it's got to do to operate, right? And so as we understand that, hey, there's these different systems that it exist within us, then we can kind of start applying them in larger settings and say, hey, I need to take the mind and I need to conquer that beast within me, right? I'll give you an example. One way to look at it is how many days can someone survive fasting, as an example, right? And so if I'm fasting, let's say I do 4 weeks of fasting or whatever, right? Like that's that's me taking control of my body, right? People can last 3 days without fasting. If I tell someone to do a fast of 24 hours, oh my gosh, you sound like I'm trying to kill them, right? They're actively like, but the reality is none of that those symptoms aren't real, like in the sense that like you're not actually dying, you're just trying to kick a habit. You have a bad habit of overeating, and you don't even realize it until what? It's like, and then everyone's like, what's going on? And so we want to change those bad habits by focusing the mind over matter, right? So it's like a dog trainer or something. If I want to train my dog, if I want to help them out, like I got to make sure that I'm training appropriately, that I'm giving him the right information. And that's going to help me connect with them, and that's going to help me understand them. Now, again, it goes back to, are we looking at the present or are we looking at the future? Because then wherever we're at, it's going to change the trajectory of how we kind of like, move forward. And we want to work towards developing a core understanding of like, hey, like I do need the physical, I do need certain things. Like, there's like all those basic stuff are important. But to what degree do I need them, and how often, and what am I doing with this information, right? Like, what do I need this for? So all in all, what I've been wanting to teach you guys is to show you that there are so many metaphors, there are so many ways of looking at this information, that in the end, it all relates back to the different selves and really honing in on where am I at. And again, it's telling me, I was telling you guys about the fasting, right? And again, if I tell someone just 24 hours, they lose their mind. Why? Because they're so conditioned to believe that's normal that they just continue doing it, right? And even though we might be like, that's not healthy for you, that's not good for you, they're not ready to hear that. So they're not going to listen to the people that have reason. The time they listen to people that have reason, they actually are seeking answers. So if you want to be able to help someone, they have to be able to at times looking for the answers, because if not, they won't understand like what's happening and what's going on. So they're much more likely to avoid and be uncomfortable. So, but yes, this is some of the information that I've been collecting lately and understanding and seeing like, hey, there's like something here to this. And the more that I explore, the more I start getting really into what I'm seeing and how it's affecting everybody. Now, if we go back up here for a second, I want to explain to you guys something. Like, so when we talk about the lower half and we talk about like problems, like I'm going to give you guys an example of why the lower half is a problem, right? So there's guys out there, and I know there's probably women too, but these are guys that I'm thinking of that will go around saying, hey, I can provide you sex, food, and money, but I'm not available for love. And so what they're telling you is they're not willing to love themselves. They're not willing to do a deeper dive in the self, which is why they're struggling, moving forward in life or developing the self, because they're so worried, about that lower half and that lower existence and that negativity in their mind. And so we live in a place where power, again, they'd rather sacrifice love, a genuine connection, to sustain sex, food, and power, which is exactly what the system that we are at wants, a capitalist system. So the capitalist system is saying, well, that's just what it has to be, right, guys? Well, there's a problem with this. Capital, when you have capital as an option, you start to create some interesting dynamics within human behavior. An example, there was this story, and I'm sure everyone's heard of this. There was a candy that was problemized, infected, whatever you want to call it. There was a candy that had been poisoned, and it was a pixie stick. And it happened during Halloween, so the dad was like, oh my god, they gave him a pixie stick, and he died, and they couldn't figure out. And then later on, they found out it was the dad. And the reason he did it was he was trying to get insurance money. And so this is going back to what we're saying here, like the lower halves, sex, food, and power, are all about money, insurance, right? Having that control. But the rest of it is outside of those things, right? So we have to give away our earthly flesh. We have to give away that hunger. We have to give away that material, like whatever it is, to finally find love, expression, intuition, and wisdom, right? To gain to the higher levels of self, you have to maintain the lower levels of self, even if it's a challenge. But it's the whole saying, as above, so below. So whatever you do to the bottom helps the top, and that same could be the same thing for fasting, right? So if you're fasting from the bottom, that could help the top too, like kind of achieve that fasting state, and learning how to like manage those different parts of how we're going through like these different challenges. But yes, so you can see now we live in a society who favors capital. Last time we had the hippies or love, it was like the hippy dippy movement, right? So they didn't really like that. And expression, intuition, and wisdom, I would probably say, like segregation and all that stuff when it got separated, and like things like that, probably more related to that. But you can see that even with all these complex, situations that we're dealing with, they all kind of generally still apply to the tools that we're being given, because again, this is reality for what it is, right? So we want to combine the self into a being who can be present, can communicate when necessary, can put limits when necessary. I like to think your animal inside is more like a dog, and you gotta you gotta teach it, you gotta condition it to know what to look for, and then eventually it will come looking for you. And so we want to cultivate good energy, good information, and we want to make sure that we're bringing the best selves to any kind of like situation you're going to be dealing with, so that you can go in there full on knowing that, hey, this is what I was meant to do, this is what's going on, and this is what feeds me. And so we want to be able to keep giving ourselves what we need to enlighten ourselves and improve, and we want to be able to watch ourselves become the best version of ourselves. So again, we are learning about how these different systems can affect the human body, and how when you understand each one of them, they're not necessarily bad, but they do have limits. They do have things that need to be addressed, and they do have ways that they can be improved on. So I just want to, teach you guys that, hey, if you want to get to the higher self, you have to get the lower self. And that's another thing. If there like there's like like some challenges with self-development and things like that, sometimes we have to reconsider, like, where am I putting my energy? Am I still like craving? Am I still pulling my attention to these things that I don't really want anymore? Am I maybe losing my value system, and what, like, where am I going with my life? So there's a lot of things that can affect someone's system, and that can impact the way they are communicating with others. So by being able to fast, by being able to be more direct and meditate on things, it really heightens your ability to stay present, and really heightens your ability to be consistent. And the more that we get away from the lower self, the material, the higher we become in our spiritual nature. And so yeah, these are some of the things that have been, like, again, going on in my mind, and I've been trying to explain to people some things. Another thing I'll talk to you guys about, like, we got on here, we got the stomach, right? So we're talking about the stomach, and the stomach is what we call the lake of fire, right? So the stomach, again, goes in there, nothing comes out. It's just pure lava. It's pure just bad, right? So that's what hell's supposed to look like. That's an example of, like, what hell is, right? Then you have your nose. And so, again, this is for breathing, regulating, and kind of being, like, more grounded. And again, that's where it's being fed. And then the mind, again, feeds the young, like, what am I learning? What am I doing? All those things. So at the bottom, we got the pit. Okay, so that's the bottom. That's hell. You're not getting out of there. Then we have earth, which is that middle one. That's where you might start seeing people that are, your loved ones or whatever, right? Start showing up in that area. And we want to be able to make sure that we understand, like, hey, like, I have to, care for me, and make sure that I love myself, and I know what I want from life. And so, again, breathing helps you bring yourself to your center, and also highlights your personality. So that's one thing we want to think about. And then we have the head, right? And so, actually, the earth is like a root system within your lungs. So you have like a tree root, and that's why that's the root, right? That's the lungs, okay? And then you have things like up above where you can say something like, hey, we have the mind where, when you're feeding your mind with information, right, you're going to start seeing things that are branching out into different perspectives. So you start blossoming the lotus because you start receiving information beyond your capacity, just like a flower would open up for the light above. So you're learning how to open up and expand your mind in a way where you are open and being fed information and really starting to pick up and understand on things. And so we have these different layers of existence. We have the pit below, which is like where Satan's at, the four-headed dragon, which is the four-headed dragon's the cardinal directions, and which is why you go north, south, east, west. So that's the dragon, and it reads all directions. And if you don't rule it, it will rule over you. That's why it's a serpent. That's why it's a snake and all these things, because a snake represents energy, and energy eats itself. And there's a couple of things, like if you were doing fasting too many days, or you fasted to death, you literally would be eating yourself to death, right? So pit, branches of a tree, the trunk, roots of a tree, the trunk, and then branches, right? So if you want to be more close to earth, right? If you want to be closer to the divine, then you focus your mind and you read and you figure out what you want to be doing, and you give yourself permission to branch into different conversations and really hold your truth at the highest form, right? So you can see again, there's these levels of consciousness that are kind of within our system, and people don't realize that these are really more accurate than people like to say. Another thing I like to throw out sometimes is, you've heard the term lizard people, right? Oh, there's reptilians and lizard people. Well, what I can say about that is, well, if you look at what I'm saying, if you were to, hurt people, instead of consider like what you're doing, like if you were just to be a consumer, then you're not going to be able to achieve your higher levels of self, right? Because again, the snake doesn't care. The snake will just consume itself, right? And we have purpose. We want to connect with people. And again, in this day and age, it can be very challenging to connect with people. Why? Because they're so dualitied, okay? As people have like two different sides of them, and they'll tell you one thing while something else is going on, and then it can get kind of confusing. So, but yes, this is the system that we're looking at to help us understand how do we gain that direct consciousness. One thing you want to do is you want to slay the beast, or at least conquer it, become one with that energy, and then start wielding it in a way where it's going to push it up. And just taking your time to activating that pineal gland, putting pressure on it, oscillating and opening up your mind. And those kind of things are also important because they teach us parts of our mind that we probably haven't been taught. And it gives us an opportunity to test these things out and try them for ourselves so that we can become much more comfortable in being who we are, right? Because we're not at the mercy of, other people. Another thing I want to teach you guys is, I'll actually switch back for a second to the other one. I'm going to switch this over here. Okay. So let's talk about the toroidal. So this is a toroidal. All right. This is the flower of life, and this is the toroidal field. This is what it looks like. Now, this is what your heart is creating around you. Like, you're the middle part, and your heart's kind of feeling. That's why you can feel people behind you. You can feel weird and sensations because your body's feeling it, right? And the way our system works, our society, is that they take this and then they squish you down to a size that they can harvest you, right? And so the idea is that this ball naturally wants to open. So if I keep pushing back on it, I can keep harvesting for its will. I just got to keep managing where I want to hold it, and then the more I hold it and manage it, right, the more power I get, right? And so this thing wants to express itself, and we are the same way. We want to express ourselves. We want to be somebody that can, explain things and say, this is who I am. But we focus so much on what is holding us here than how to break free and become one. And even with this thing, I can flip it around, have a good time, and it always comes back to being itself, right? There it is. Instead of this, where I'm always trying to get out somehow, and they just hold me there, and that's how they harvest our energy. they try to harvest our willpower. So they give you enough will to do something, but then you're doing what they want. So then you end up just doing exactly what they want, but without knowing it, right? So this is the difference. So instead of focusing on all the places I can't get out, that's where you would focus on where can I get out. And then you find yourself in this situation. So there are times where we want to understand some of the, what's going on within the system and the allegories that you're going to see. So, it's important to recognize where you stand on certain things and how you can continue to improve and apply. And so these are some the different topics and things that have been coming up for me that have been helpful in helping people, understand the tools, understand like, hey, what does it mean to be with someone who might be heartless, and what does that actually look like literally, right? Like lizard brain mentality, right? Instead of just talking about, oh, does he put a mask on, and like literally somebody willing to do things that are not of natural, descent or natural origin, and then causing problems as a result of that. So it's just something that you see in people these days, is just, and allowing themselves to be in these relationships where they feel they're having to dumb themselves down to feel loved, and that process will never end. That's why you have to conquer the nature. Oh, there's also a difference between a stupid person and an evil person. Evil, cognitively, you are very well aware of what you're doing. Stupid people are more ignorant, right? They're like an animal that needs to be conditioned in that way, right? It's like the dog that's new starts peeing everywhere, and you're like, oh my God, why is this dog doing this? And you're like, ugh. Right? Unruly. But that doesn't mean you can't train and condition it, because you will be able to get it back in some kind of order, right? And so that's part of, the unruliness in people, is that if someone doesn't correct you, you're going to keep doing what you're doing without any kind of sense of consequence. And yeah, that's not something that's going to be conducive for someone's, self-care and being the best version of themselves. So we want to, again, regulate and help people understand how to become the best version of yourself, how to become more patient with yourself. And I do find that with people, they can feel that shift from their letting go of power, but they kind of want to hold on again. It's like, no, it's like trying to do a deep breath while flexing your muscles. It's very difficult. It's hard, if you flex them all, because they need each other to kind of grow and adapt. And when one can't pull, it definitely can bring somebody down on an emotional level and make you feel off. And so going to what we want to kind of work with and where our sense of direction's going. These days, I've really been checking out Gnosticism and the Catholic stuff, like the original stuff, like OG, and just seeing how much of that world applies to today's age, and you're just like, wow, we're onto something here. And everything I've been taught is probably the opposite of what I'm being taught now. And I can break down reality, or at least break down the human consciousness, pretty well, but that's because I had to do the studying to figure out. Wasn't part of the system that we grew up in. It's a separate part of the system that they didn't want us to grow up in, and to keep us away from the truth. Because when we stay away from the truth, people can manipulate. They can take over. They can continue to use you and squish you. And people are getting tired of that. And I do believe that there's a spiritual awakening happening within people right now, and it is bubbling into the possibilities of creation, right? The one thing I've been working towards is, I think I've said this earlier, but I want to get into exorcisms and really understanding how evil spirits work, because I've seen at least the pride. I've seen. And I wouldn't even say evil for some of those. I would say they're more just based on emotion. So just somebody not regulating enough. Evil is that person sold themselves and they know exactly what they did. So evil to me are like the elites who know what they're doing, but they're not going to get removed. They're not going to get anything happen to them because they're so wealthy. Like, what are you going to do? Like, stand up to them? It's not going to happen. And so what I recommend people do too is give yourself an opportunity to be open to the Holy Spirit, which really means your intuition, or your animal, like your heart, and it will guide you. If you meditate on things, it will eventually say, go there, go do that, go over here. And that is how I have been collecting the information that I have been, is because I've been really exploring like what different mentalities and belief systems that I truly have and try to understand how they apply to my life. Like, for example, I learned a new one, Catholic or Católica. If you break it down to what Catholic really means, it's actually Greek for universal. So it's interesting to me how the Catholic Church is called the universal church of Christ, essentially. And that to me was like, wow, that's really cool. Like, I actually like that. That makes a lot of sense. And when you look at the rituals and if you apply mysticism, it makes perfect sense why they do the things they do. Because it's about the mysticism. Because there is definitely a sense of control that you can have in how you manage your energy. So you look at things like Protestant, and the difference is they took out the mysticism of the entire process. Like, they took that out. Like, there is no mysticism. They like gave you the most basic form of like spirituality. And the reality is it's way more interesting when you really get into the meat of things. I feel like Protestant is a perfect encapsulation of the United States culture, where it's not really based on creating a mystic environment. It's based on providing control in an environment that feels so separate. So because you live in a culture that does not necessarily have its own history, they will start to adopt a history, right? And I think for me, seeing people go to church was a way to kind of like give them people, because technically none of these people were from the same backgrounds, right? So it's like you're going to have people in America from Poland, from like Denmark, from Africa, from like literally everywhere, right? So the problem is that because it's such a diverse situation, there is a very little camaraderie in how we operate. And so I believe that religion played a big part in connecting people that weren't part of the same creeds or backgrounds. But the problem is with Protestant, it's definitely not, again, Catholic. It's definitely not involved like with mass and like really understanding like energy and meditation. And I feel like for a lot of the stuff you see with like Protestants and stuff, it's like you get there, you get the basics, and then you're out. And that's not what Catholic's about. Catholic's about a deep divine understanding of like this greater energy. That's why the churches were built with like God in mind, like literally like cymatics and frequency. And I believe the Catholic Church is so much more closer to what Jesus would have at least taught to some extent, because it has a foundation from there, versus like Protestant, which is like a direct like counter to what was already established. Now, are there things that are not great about the current state of Catholicism? 1000%, yes. And I, like I said, would prefer that people do their own kind of like divinity research, because you'll find that, hey, like the truth is going to be out there, and the more that you keep studying and staying with an open heart, it will reveal itself to you. Just like I've been learning about gnosis, I have been looking at the different types of like gnostic cultures that were there. But I'm also fascinated by the original Catholics, like back when the Templars were around. Because that to me, it resonates a lot more with me as a person today, as a man. I would rather much be a Templar. Like, that makes perfect sense to me. Like, the way they operate, the chivalry, like, we even, like, respect the word chivalry. I mean, and you go back to the Templar days, they were so respected that wherever they went, people like, they're cool. Like, they can transcend, like, reality and to some extent. And that's just the beauty of, like, when you have a system of people that really care about something, and a system of like men and women who work together to create something beautiful, well, we get a lot of progress. But when you have a system that's trying to fight tooth and nail to, focus on capital and literally secularize everything, so it's just like, ugh. And then again, you're teaching these like really like low energy types of environments for spirituality. Well, you're just kind of leaving people to like, you need, like, it's like the Jesus freak kind of situation where you need Jesus and he's your only savior, and it's all based on fear, when the reality is that there is no fear being told in this book, as long as you are following like a good consciousness and like really like listening to what the way is. You will find that, hey, like there's something to this. It's a system of belief. It's not just, oh, Jesus saves and this is blood and that's it and I donated my life to him. No, it's, what does that mean? What do these words mean? It's not just, oh, I read a thing and it's all good. No, like, do the rituals. Where does this come from? Why does this happen? Where is this at? What is, like, get down to the root and the foundation of these principles if you truly want to understand what divinity is. So it's like, give yourself an opportunity to be free with these things, and they will present. And again, just keep looking, just keep being curious, and let it happen. And you will watch how beautiful it can be. Because again, just as much as you were born without really having a sense of direction, you've made it this far. And actually, you had a sense of direction the whole time. You just didn't always listen to it. And so it's even funnier. And that's how we kind of tie back to what God is, right? Where these things have been happening for years. And we don't always understand like how they're all going to play out. But when they do, you're like, that is wild. For example, like I got a tattoo back in the day of like a paladin emblem. And a paladin is like a crusader or a templar or whatever you want to call it. And just to see myself like later on like really resonating with the way they operate and the way they believe things, and I'm sitting here like, huh, like there was something in me even before I was spiritual calling me, telling me, showing me, sending me. And when you listen to these things, you start to realize, wow, there's something beautiful here. Just like the first Bible that I had was from my grandma that had given it to my mom from a different, from a different state and country essentially. And that Bible came to me, and that now, is that the Bible that I'm going to like really focus on? No, but it was a step, and it needed to happen just to say, look, this means something. This is the Costco sample. And it's good because as I'm talking about, Protestants, and I'm talking about, like, for example, the King James Bible, as one, that Bible is going to be much different than, again, a Catholic Bible, or even like I like the Ethiopian Bible as well. And go deep into these things, further than what you've been taught. And that's why when they ask me, what do you believe? What I know. This is what I believe. This is why I believe this. And that's it. That's me having faith in what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. Is me stepping into the role where I know, hey, I'm satisfied with the way this is playing out. And remaining in that and staying in that. That is conviction. That is trust. That is faith. That is love. That is grace. And I will continue to serve him as he chooses, and I'm going to continue to serve you guys as we go through this process. So I appreciate everything that you guys have done to be here with me, and well, let's keep learning together. And I will be going down the path of, like, again, learning how to do exorcism. So as I get more information on that, I'm more than happy to share it and see kind of how it goes. But I've just had some things happen in my life where this is where my body and mind say, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to keep moving towards. And again, this wasn't something that somebody taught me like, oh, you're going to do this one day, or you should know. It was definitely nothing that I had ever considered was going to be part of my life, let alone, again, expelling negative energy. Like, not something that I was putting on my bingo card in my life. But now that I get to do that, I'm going to be 100% grateful that I get an opportunity to do something incredible with my life. And I get to do it while being viewed by something beyond my capacity and something greater than myself. So, all right, guys, I appreciate everyone coming, and I will see you guys on the next one. We'll be around.